Sister, thank you for joining us today. I've had the pleasure of knowing you at St. Helens for many years, but share with our viewers about your life.
Thanks, Julie. It's really nice to be back home when I get to come back in the summer. So my religious name is Sister Maria, Madre de Las Americas. It's a title given to Our Lady of Guadalupe. All of our sisters receive a name of Mary, so we can be like a litany to Mary. And it was John Paul II, Saint John Paul II, the Great, who said that Our Lady of Guadalupe is not just a queen, but a mother, because through her the faith was born in Mexico and all of the Americas. So that's my name, and I'm really glad to have it. My lay name was Yesenia Flores, and so I grew up in Houston, born and raised, but we moved to Pearland in 5th grade, and so 5th grade on, I became a St. Helen parishioner.
That's awesome. Was your family very involved in the Catholic faith?
No, I think we were a family that would just come to get the mints, you know, the sacraments. When I grew up, it was random Sundays that we would go to Mass. And I actually started losing my faith as a kid, you know, growing up to be a teenager. So my mom decided to put me into confirmation classes. But, you know, being Mexican, I was actually baptized and confirmed in Mexico, but she didn't know you couldn't get confirmed twice. So I got into confirmation classes, and I was put in a class. It was a really small RCIC class, and I had an amazing catechist. And he taught me that Jesus is truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, when I thought it was just a symbol. And so he had us opening the Bible, reading John chapter 6, learning the creed, doing all these amazing things that I had never even wanted to do or thought about. So I had a big conversion, and I was only 14, 15 years old. And so that was my first conversion into the church. And so wanting to come and then be a part of youth group and go to confirmation retreat, and that was a turning point in my life.
I see where you fell in love with Jesus, but how did you know that you had a calling? How did you discern?
Well, discernment is a funny word because everybody has a different definition for it, and it's a process. But for me, it began with just being in love with Jesus. And in college, because I'd never known sisters, I never ran into them. They weren't in church. They weren't in my daily life. But when I went to U of H, I was a member of the Catholic Center, the Newman Center. I went to Bioawakening Retreat, and, you know, just becoming a part of the bigger church community, you know, with more young adults and being more active, and then seeing the sisters and priests come and visit the Newman Center all the time. And so it wasn't like I didn't really start discerning before I got to know a little bit of what these sisters did or what missionary priests were. And so it started like that, you know, just kind of like being curious about who these people were and what they were doing, you know. So it was a process.
So did you visit several orders then in order for you to decide?
Well, at first it was talking to the sisters that would come and visit. So the Villa de Mattel sisters would often invite us to retreats and talk to us about prayer. And then we had some Mexican sisters that were in San Antonio that would come and visit, and just, you know, little like that. I didn't really visit too many orders in Houston. I tended to go out. I visited a Filipino order. We went to Delaware for a vacations retreat there with a few friends of mine. Yeah, it was like that.
Thank you. What about, how did you decide that this was a calling for you? Did anything happen in your life to where you finally decided, yes, this is God calling me, and I am responding to that yes?
Right. Well, like I said, it was a process. So I could say that I was 19 when I started being curious about religious life, but to the point where I just want to know what they do, but it's not for me, you know? But I had, you know, just because I was very social, and so it made me a natural evangelizer since I was like already so on fire for my faith. And I would just bring people to Jesus and bring people to Jesus. And I remember this moment where I was hanging out at the Hispanic Center on campus at U of H, and a bunch of these boys just told me they hadn't been to confession since First Communion. And so I said, no, that's not acceptable. And well, back then, Father Italo, who's now Bishop Italo Deloro, he was one of the spiritual directors that would come on campus. And so I gave him a call and said, Father, can I bring you a bunch of boys for confession? And he's like, yeah, I'm available. Come on up. And we went up. I put them in my Corolla. We drove up to Christ the King, and up on 45 North. Mm-hmm. And they all went to confession. And so I went. I was the last one to go. And he just looked at me like, what is this girl doing, bringing all these boys to confession? Like, this is not a normal, everyday thing. And so after I finished my confession, he says, Yesenia, haven't you thought that maybe you have a vocation? And I was like, a what? He's like, maybe God is calling you to be a religious, a sister, a spouse of Christ. And I said, oh, yeah, that's not for me. No. Yeah, that's not for me. And he was like, okay, we just think about it. And it was many people that would tell me that, the campus minister, random people that would get to know me would be like, have you ever thought that you have a vocation? And I was like, that's not for me. My desire was to be a missionary doctor, I did want to go to Egypt. I did want to go to Africa. I wanted to work with women and the poor, but I wanted to be a missionary doctor. I wanted to be free to do whatever I wanted to do, to help the people that I wanted to help and just travel. I never thought about what a vocation was, And so little by little, people were saying, well, you have to ask what Jesus wants for you. God is the one calling you. You have to ask what he wants for you. And so little by little, that curiosity just got stronger and stronger and stronger of like, okay, what is it that these sisters do? Mm-hmm. So my formal discernment began when I started asking, what is the life of a sister? And because I was kind of shy about it, I wasn't wanting everybody to know that I was discerning, I started discerning on Facebook. Back then, Facebook was only for college students. And so we had a page where you could talk to religious. There were sisters and priests and just religious, consecrated people that would answer questions. So it was like a blog, like a forum on Facebook. And so I started asking these questions to one of the sisters who was a Salesian, daughters of Mary Help of Christians, the Salesian sisters. And I just started asking her questions. And everything I would ask her, she would say, yeah, you can do that as a sister. I said, no, but I want to be a missionary doctor. And she's like, you could do that as a sister. No, but I want to go to Africa and Egypt. And she's like, yeah, we have missions there. No, but it's really important to work with the poor and the youth and, to be able to help them financially. And I was like, yeah, we do that. We fundraise and we help people in that way. And you could do that as a sister. And so all these buts that I had, all these no, pero esto, she would be like, you could do that as a sister. If that's what God wants for you, like, there's no limits. And I remember just sitting, because that was the year I was living in the dorms, and I was just remember sitting in front of my computer in my room, just thinking, this is a possibility. Like, God wants me to be a sister. What does that mean, And so it was exciting and scary at the same time. So it was truly a process of saying, okay, this is something that he might want for me. And that curiosity kept growing and growing. And even if I was distracting myself with going to parties, dating a boy, whatever it was, there was still that little inquietud, I wasn't at peace with what I was doing, And that little voice behind my head, even though I was with a beautiful, even doing apostolate while I was dating somebody and we were doing apostolate together, and it was just that little voice saying, you're not meant for this, you're meant for more, and going to prayer and just being understanding that having a vocation is Jesus. I don't know if I imagined this, but it was Jesus, in my prayer, he told me, he got down on one knee in front of me and said, will you be my spouse?
What a beautiful vision.
It was so beautiful. And there, I was so crazy. I became so on fire and so happy that I had a vocation that I started just acting like a crazy person. And my friends were like, what happened? Did somebody give you drugs? What's wrong with you? And I was like, no, it's just, Jesus wants me to be a nun. Jesus wants me to be his spouse. And it was just so exciting, But I didn't know where yet. I just knew I had a vocation, but I didn't know where or what I was supposed to do specifically. I was at U of H, I was studying to be a doctor, I was pre-med, biochem major, Spanish minor, just trying to do my day to day. And yeah, it's like that.
But it sounded like you had a prerequisite of what you wanted in this new life that God was calling you
Right, because I was already saying, I want to go to Egypt, I want to work with women, I want to work with youth, right. And so, you know what I ended up doing is I sat down and I wrote a list of what I wanted in an order. But at the same time, I was like, okay, God, if you really want this for me, I'm also going to make a list of what I want in the perfect husband. And so I made it was like 5 things. And they're, you know, when I think about it, they're kind of parallel, because I wanted, first of all, like, my Mexican culture is so important, so I wanted the order to be a Latino order, a Hispanic order, you know, somewhere where I can speak Spanish and still be my normal self. And so that was on the first thing, Hispanic. And then I wrote that also on my boy list. He has to be Hispanic or understand Spanish or, you know, be familiar with our culture. And then I said, but I want to study in Italy, because I know in Italy we'll be close to the Pope and, you know, have a good formation. I want to study theology and philosophy. So I wrote that. And then I said, well, in a boy, I want somebody who's a philosopher, who maybe he could also be Italian. So I put that philosopher, Italian, whatever. And then I said, well, I do want to be in an order that's more traditional. You know, I wanted to wear a full habit. I wanted to be, you know, have that focus on the liturgy and the Eucharist, and just be, you know, all in, not halfway in, you know. So I knew I didn't want to be like a lay consecrated. I wanted to be a full religious. So I wrote that. And then for the boy, I was like, well, somebody who loves his mother and like takes care of his family. And I was like, okay, well, that family aspect was so important for me. So I said, okay, I want to be in a religious family. I want to be in a place where there's also priests, and we have a relationship, priests and sisters, so that we become a family, you know? And I said, well, I still have that desire to travel. Okay, so I also put that, the boy is going to travel with me. If we're going to get married, we're going to be missionaries together, no matter what job he has. I'm going to be a doctor, he's going to be whatever, and we're going to travel. And I want to go to Egypt. And so I put that on my list, that I want to go to Egypt. You know, so it has to be an order that has a mission in Egypt, right? And lo and behold, well, I thought I found a boy that had some of those things. And then at the same time, it was my last year of college, and a friend of mine had posted a video on his Facebook about our sisters. And they were interviewing the servidoras and saying that, you know, it's such a young community, we're traditional. We're not traditionalist. We're more traditional, but we're not traditionalist. You know, it's not like Latin Mass and rigid, you know. And there was just like this beautiful free spirit. And they were Hispanic, founded in Argentina, and it just seemed like it had all the answers that I wanted. But I didn't know if there was a mission in Egypt. So then when I looked online, there was a mission in Egypt since 1999.
Wow.
And I said, that's it, I want to go visit. And so what I did was, I graduated from college at U of H on a Sunday. On a Monday, I had already arranged to go visit one of their missions in New York. So I went to East Harlem, and I spent a week there with one of my friends, and we were just getting to know the sisters, and they were doing normal things like parish work, catechism, preparing for First Communion. We were, you know, getting those little booklets ready for the First Communion Mass, making pizza, because there's a tradition that we eat pizza every Friday. You know, things, we just had so much fun, you know, praying with them and hanging out with the sisters and just doing what they do.
It sounded like they were so welcoming to you and helped you in the process of making your decision.
They did. It was so. It felt like a family. You know, that's what I was looking for.
And it sounds a lot like your checklist. God met every single thing on your list.
Exactly. You know, that's what the thing about vocation, because God is calling, and He's calling you not against your nature. He's calling you something that He's already been preparing for you. So I really believe like those desires that were in my heart, they were already given to me by my Lord and spouse, you know, and so He was preparing me for what I was going to be doing. And but at the same time, I wasn't ready to fully say I'm going to go. You know, I finished college and I said, okay, well, I have some debt I need to work on. So I started working at the hospital at UTMB in the research department, and I liked my job. I worked labor and delivery. I worked at a clinic. I collected specimen, I drew blood, I talked to a lot of patients, and I always had that pro-life aspect, you know, of like trying to help these people say no to contraception and say no to abortion, but you know, in the down low. And so I still was trying to be like my own apostolic self while I was working, but I started dating somebody who was becoming too much of a serious relationship for me, and so, but that joy and that fire that I had in the beginning was starting to dwindle, and I felt like I wasn't being myself anymore, you know, and so there was something wrong, and yet I couldn't like break that relationship and say, I'm gonna enter the convent. And so what happened was, God allowed me to have a St. Paul fall off your horse situation where I was driving in my car with my little brother. I don't know if he remembers this, like we were coming from my boyfriend's house, going home, and on 45 South, like I just end up sideswiping a Suburban and my little Corolla, lost control of the car. And it was like all these angels were surrounding me because nothing hit me and I didn't hit anything else, not the medium, not anything on the side, nothing. But in that split second, I really think it was like a judgment time. Like I felt like if I were to die, and where would I go? You know, it was, I had been avoiding my vocation. I had been living in a state of questionability. Like I wasn't living in a state of grace all the time, you know, and I wasn't at peace. I wasn't saying yes to God. Where was I gonna go? Am I saying yes to God? I mean, going to heaven is saying, yes, God, I love you, I wanna be with you forever. Was I saying that? I was avoiding him. And so in that moment, I was able to like have that enough grace to say no more to this boy, and I'm gonna get ready to enter the convent. Because he was getting ready to buy me a ring, and I was like not ready for that. There was something missing in my life. And you know, when I finally entered the convent, I entered our novitiates in Maryland. It's on this big, beautiful farm, and so there's cows and goats and like a corn maze that they do, and it's just such a beautiful place. And it was just like this environment of family. And when I entered, I was like, why did I wait so long? You know, it was like 5 years since I started discerning to finally say yes to my vocation. And I was just so happy to be there. And I couldn't go back. And so I could tell you right now, like, thanks be to God, I've had the grace that I've never resented, or what is it? Like I've never felt bad about my vocation. Like I love that I decided to enter and follow him, and I love where he has sent me. I'm a missionary, and that desire to go to Egypt, he let me go to Egypt. Now I'm in the Middle East, you know, and it's like he's been preparing this for me, and he's always with me, you know, and it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful thing to be a spouse of Christ, you know.
What an amazing story. I want to thank you for sharing with us this story with us. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're
so exciting.
welcome.
And I just want to say also thank you to all the parishioners of St. Helens that have constantly, you know, assured me of their prayers, because I know now that I live in Syria, it's been so important for me to have that prayer family, you know, supporting me. And it's truly made itself felt. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that supports in prayer and supports with good messages, and also supports my parents and gives them positive encouragement. So thank you. And may God continue to bless this community.